having those high skill options uh, opens up paths to interesting challenges. Like, can you beat Abberoth with the veterans boots on that make the game way harder? Like that's a sweet challenge. I don't know if anyone's done that yet.
Like so.
All right, so
If it has, I want to know.
Hey folks, I'm going to be doing a bit of a voiceover over this fight to explain a little bit of what's going on, add a bit of context. For the build, I'm using the Frostboss Sorcerer. I didn't want to use Static Orb because it is extremely overpowered, and I thought that wouldn't really be a fair way to do the Abberoth fight here. So right off the start, what you see here is me interrupting the slam attack right before it hits. You can't actually stun lock the boss, but you can interrupt some of the attacks, the slam being one of them. So this doesn't really help that much as far as like avoiding damage, but it does allow you to keep more DPS time up, which is very important in this fight. As you'll see, the duration of the fight goes on, more and more of these beams spawn in the arena, which means that this is a race against the clock. I actually need to try to get as much DPS time in as I can, while also trying to maintain my mana. So you can see my mana is not great. I need to recover it with the Teleport Meteor combo. So it's important for me to not spam too much and run out of mana, because otherwise, if I do that, I will also run out of ward, because my ward is based on my mana. So you can see here, I'm doing my best to avoid the balls. If you put them in the arena, because this is a pretty drawn out fight, the little balls leave the DOTs on the ground, which makes the last part of the fight very difficult. So one thing that I noticed when doing this fight is if you use the wrong warp, which teleports you somewhat randomly near the balls, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to port right into them, spawning the void goo. So I always try to avoid using wrong warp near the big purple balls, as that usually ends up backfiring. Another thing to note about wrong warp specifically, and why it's very useful in this fight, is after you use teleport, you get 1 second of immunity. So you'll see a lot of points throughout this fight. There are times where I walk right through damage. This is actually a time right here. I tried to use teleport right as I saw the damage coming, but I actually ran out of stun immunity right before that happened, and I got stunned, which prevented me from using the teleport, so that was the closest I came to dying in this fight. Yeah, so if you don't get your teleport off when you want, you get stunned or something like that, you can rip extremely easily in this fight, even though it does look fairly easily. A lot of these attacks are quite deadly, even with my level of gear. So you can see here, I'm trying my best to avoid the beams. When the beams are up, I am trying to save my teleport as much as I can, so if I do need to get out of a dangerous situation, I can use the teleport, and then use the boost of movement speed to get out of danger. Yeah, so you can see here, I'm just doing my best to avoid the balls. I'm trying to sustain my mana, keep it as high as possible. And when you hear the voice cues, like the die or whatever, and it starts doing the green things, you immediately avoid out of the way. Wherever you were before, you just avoid that. And then there you can see the guy does the pizza slice attack with the 3 triangles. I just immune through the attack with wrong warp. If you don't have wrong warp, teleport on cooldown, you will need to avoid those. So the easiest way is to just go into the first triangle area after that attack fades away. So you immediately go out and then you go back in. That's generally how I avoid that attack. Here we're getting towards the end of the fight. This part is quite difficult. The arena gets very small. At this point, if you have triggered a lot of the void goo circles on the ground, it gets pretty difficult to avoid them all. So at this point, you have the beam attack. This one is quite easy to avoid. You just need to see where it starts charging, and then it will turn towards you right at the end. You just evade through the boss, and it should miss you completely. At the end here, I saved up as much of my snap freeze charges as I can. because this part gets extremely hard to dodge everything. You can see there I had to immune teleport through all of those DOT effects, otherwise I would have died pretty much instantly. And here I'm just trying to avoid everything I can, saving up my snap freeze charge for when the boss does a big attack. And there you can see I immune teleport through some of the scary stuff again when I get locked into a corner. So now we're just trying our best to stay alive. I snap freeze him out of this attack because it's extremely hard to dodge everything. We get good timing on the teleport, immune there. I saved it for that attack, which lets us live through the pizza cutter. And there we go. That is the end of the fight. It ends up looking quite easy, but I have to say, of all the ARPG games I played over the years, this was by far the most difficult fight that I'd ever done. Even though the build is crazy, this is still a really hard fight with those veteran boots. And we were rewarded with a pretty insane Nihilus +2 skills with 2 LP and a generally good roll. Crazy stuff. So yeah, you can see the gear here. Here's the veteran boots. You deal significantly less damage. You take more damage. It's a little bit weird to say, but I think that the harder part of that fight with those boots is actually the reduced damage, because it drags on the fight for a really long time, and at any point one mistake can end the fight. It kind of ends up being a little bit like a Dark Souls boss when you are using those boots, let alone if you didn't have a really strong build like I do, you'd pretty much be screwed. Like any small attack would just knock you over. This build specifically, I have an insane amount of DR. I have the Orion's Eye Amulet, which gives a bunch of DOT mitigation and also fire damage reduction. I have the Prismatic Gaze, which is LE damage reduction. I have more DR in the Rune Master tree and so on. DR basically everywhere, tanky build. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Cheers, folks.